On the distant shores of the eastern Mediterranean, a mere 4,000 Spanish soldiers stood defiant against a tide of 50,000. This is their story. We find ourselves in the year 1538, at the beginning, but already at a crucial point, of the Ottoman-Habsburg Wars, which pitted the Ottoman Empire against the states of the House of Habsburg. Castelnuovo, today known as Herceg Novi, in the small country of Montenegro, has just been conquered by the Spanish Tercios for the Habsburg side. But how did this situation come about? The Ottoman-Habsburg Wars began in 1526, when the army of Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent defeated Louis II of Hungary at the Battle of Mohacs. In 1529, the Sultan's forces were halted in Vienna, unable to breach the city's defenses and forced to retreat. In 1535, thanks to a Christian offensive led by Álvaro de Bazan and Andrea Doria, Tunisia was captured, successfully repelling the legendary Ottoman admiral Hayreddin Barbarossa from the western Mediterranean, who operated under the orders of Sultan Suleiman. Barbarossa, shortly after being appointed commander of a vast fleet, focused on attacking and plundering various islands and properties of the Republic of Venice. The Venetians, alarmed by the loss of their territories, pushed for the creation of a great alliance, which materialized with the mediation of Pope Paul III in the Holy League of 1538, comprising the Holy See, the Republic of Venice, the Spanish Empire, including Naples and Sicily, and the Knights of Malta. Initially, this great alliance was supposed to total an army of 50,000 infantry soldiers and another 4,500 cavalry. However, in the end, only 15,000 men, mostly Spaniards, could be gathered. In that same year of 1538, the fleet of the newly formed alliance, under the command of the Genoese Andrea Doria, faced Barbarossa's fleet in the Battle of Preveza. The result was catastrophic for the Christians, who were clearly overcome by the Ottomans. However, this defeat did not prevent the European fleet from later reaching and conquering Castelnuovo, a small coastal town with a strategic fortress. The Republic of Venice wanted to claim ownership of this success and demanded possession of the place, but King Charles I of Spain, whose troops had taken it, refused to yield. This disagreement marked the beginning of the end of the short-lived Holy League of 1538. And here is where we pick up our story. At the fortress of Castelnuovo, approximately 4,000 men were stationed, with the majority belonging to a Spanish tercio, under the command of the legendary Maestre de Campo, a high-ranking military officer equivalent to a modern-day brigadier general, Francisco Sarmiento de Mendoza y Manuel. This tercio was named the Tercio of Castelnuovo, and it consisted of 15 companies or flags. Among them, 6 flags were from the Tercio of Florence, 3 from the Tercio of Lombardy, which had been disbanded the previous year due to a mutiny over unpaid wages, 2 from the Tercio of Naples, 1 from the Tercio of Nice, and 3 new flags. Among the 15 captains of the 15 companies, Machine de Munguia stood out, a highly skilled and experienced military man. During the winter of 1538, Hayreddin Barbarossa, by order of Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, devoted himself to preparing and reinforcing his fleet for a new campaign in the spring of 1539. Meanwhile, Maestre de Campo Francisco de Sarmiento worked with his men to repair and expand the walls and fortifications of Castelnuovo, knowing that a brutal attack was imminent. The Spaniards were aware that without the support of the fleet, which, as we have said, had just been defeated in Preveza, their chances of survival were minimal, as their position would be blocked by land and sea by the Ottoman forces. Faced with this situation, they requested reinforcements, sending Sarmiento envoys to Spain, Sicily, and Brindisi. However, they received no positive response. Moreover, Andrea Doria, the main responsible for the defeat in Preveza, who now had 47 imperial galleys, not only refused to provide assistance, but also recommended that Sarmiento surrender. Thus, their fate was sealed. On June 12, 1539, the first vanguard of the Ottoman army arrived on the shores of Castelnuovo. 1,000 Turkish soldiers landed with the aim of finding drinking water and capturing any Spaniard who could provide them with information. That same morning, the first confrontation took place, and the men led by Machine de Munguia repelled the Ottomans, forcing them to flee to their ships. However, the attackers returned in the afternoon, but this time, with Francisco de Sarmiento leading the troops, the Spaniards achieved a resounding victory, killing 300 Turks, capturing 30, and causing all others to flee. On July 18th, Barbarossa finally arrived at Castelnuovo with a massive army of about 20,000 men, consisting of 16,000 foot soldiers and 4,000 janissaries, the elite units of the Ottoman army. A few days later, another army of about 30,000 soldiers led by the Persian leader Ulamen arrived to support Barbarossa on land, bringing their combined forces to 50,000 men. The immense battalion prepared for the offensive, with sappers digging trenches and building ramps for the powerful siege cannons. Castelnuovo began to be bombarded by the Ottomans, even from the ships stationed off the coast. The Spanish soldiers launched several lightning attacks to hinder the siege works, causing considerable casualties. One of these attacks, carried out with 800 men, caught several units of janissaries off guard as they attempted to breach the fortress walls. The Spaniards killed many of them, which angered Barbarossa, who severely reprimanded his captains, knowing that janissaries were very difficult units to replace. In fact, to prevent this situation from recurring, Barbarossa decided to temporarily prohibit further skirmishes. Just a few days later, on July 23rd, Barbarossa had everything ready to begin the Great Assault. But before that, knowing that the Spanish garrison was isolated and without any chance of survival, he offered them an honorable surrender with favorable conditions to avoid bloodshed. He promised the Spaniards safe return to Italy for all men, to keep their weapons and banners, and even to pay each soldier 20 ducats. In contrast, the besieged were to leave all their artillery and gunpowder behind. This is the account of two of the very few Spanish survivors of those days, the squad leaders Juan Alcaraz and Francisco de Tapia. The maestre de campo consulted with all his captains, and the captains with their officers, and they resolved that they wanted to die in service of God and His Majesty. The final response was, "Let them come whenever they want." Following such a response, the great Turkish assault began the next day. This was extremely bloody and lasted all day. The Ottomans suffered numerous casualties, both due to the good performance of the defenders and due to friendly fire, as their artillery continued to bombard the walls of Castelnuovo throughout the day. Having overcome that first day, the Spaniards dedicated the night to improving the defenses. The next morning, on St. James's Day, the efforts of the Ottomans redoubled. But miraculously, the besieged resisted once again. The final tally for the day was terrifying for the Ottomans, as it is estimated that about 6,000 men died, compared to only 50 Spaniards, although this number likely ended up being higher due to the numerous wounded. With morale very high due to the successful defense they were carrying out, it was decided to organize a counteroffensive with 600 men. The Spaniards surprised the Turks, who were unable to contain the attack in some points. Many men broke ranks and fled, including several janissaries, who ran through their own camp in panic, breaking the tents, including Barbarossa's own tent. Furthermore, the Ottoman admiral's personal guard, fearing for their leader's life, temporarily took him to his ship against his will. During the following days, the Turks focused their efforts on bombarding a fort adjacent to the city which they believed was key to successfully concluding the assault. Once reduced to rubble, Barbarossa ordered a final attack on the ruins of the fortress. Similarly, Francisco de Sarmiento also considered that fort to be of special importance, so he tried to protect the position by all means. The furious onslaughts of the Ottomans continued throughout the day. Among the Spaniards, Machine de Munguia stood out, leading the defenders. When night fell, the Spaniards had no choice but to retreat from the ruins of the fort, yielding them to the Turks. That day was very tough for the Spanish ranks, as only 4 of the officers in charge of the defense survived, including Machín de Munguía himself. In addition, among the few survivors captured by the Turks, they took 3 deserters who, brought before Barbarossa, recommended continuing the attacks, assuring him that the Spaniards, after suffering many casualties, had little gunpowder and bullets, and that many of them were wounded and exhausted. Convinced by the deserters' testimony, on August 5th, Barbarossa ordered a new offensive. Eager for final victory, all remaining janissaries were ordered to participate, and the cavalry was also ordered to dismount to join the attack on foot. Surprisingly, and despite the overwhelming numerical difference, the Spanish Tercio resisted one more day, yielding only one of the towers of the wall. Sarmiento ordered that this tower be mined to prevent the Turks from taking it, but an accidental explosion thwarted the plan and killed all the soldiers working on it. The next day, August 6th, a sudden downpour crippled the Spanish defense by soaking their gunpowder, rendering arquebuses, cannons, and any remaining supplies useless. There was no choice but to continue the epic defense using swords, pikes, and any other available weapon. The fight was so uneven numerically that every wounded Spanish soldier who was not dying had to participate. Once again, against all logic, the very few Spanish soldiers repelled the Ottoman attack. Barbarossa's final attack was unleashed the following day, on the morning of August 7th. The wall line was already reduced to rubble, and with the decimated and greatly reduced forces available, it was not possible to defend it, so the defense collapsed. However, this did not mean surrender or flight for the Tercios. Francisco de Sarmiento, mounted on horseback, continued to lead the defense, even after being wounded in the face. The great Maestre de Campo ordered the withdrawal of the 600 men still standing to a castle located in the lower part of the town, where civilians were already taking refuge. The retreat was carried out with perfect order and discipline, but upon reaching the castle, they found the gates closed. From the top of the fortress, a rope was offered to the Spanish leader to ensure his safety, but his response was resolute. God would never want me to be saved while my comrades died without me. After this, he joined the 3 remaining captains, Juan Vizcaíno, Sancho Frias, and Machín de Munguía, to lead the final defense. Completely surrounded, the Spaniards ended up fighting back to back, until there was nothing and no one left to defend. Castelnuovo had fallen. It is estimated that those 4,000 Spaniards took with them to the other world 20,000 Turkish souls, including nearly all of the 4,000 janissaries. Of the Spanish defenders, initially around 200 survived and were taken prisoner, the vast majority wounded. Among them was Machín de Munguía. Barbarossa, aware of the unparalleled valor of that soldier, whom he had already seen in the Battle of Preveza successfully defend a Venetian galley sinking under attack by several Ottoman ships, offered him freedom in exchange for joining his army. Machín de Munguía refused and was immediately beheaded. Half of the prisoners and all of the clergy were also executed, as Barbarossa's army thirsted for revenge for the brutal losses suffered in battle. The few surviving Spaniards were enslaved and sent to Constantinople. However, 25 of them would years later manage to escape and reach the shores of Italy to tell their story. Though their goal remained unrealized, Sarmiento and his men's heroism resonated throughout Europe. They were likened to Greco-Roman heroes and immortalized in poems that survive today. Regarding Castelnuovo, it would remain in Turkish hands for 150 years, until in 1687, during the Marian War, the Captain General of the Venetian Navy, Girolamo Cornaro, in conjunction with the Montenegrins under the command of Buceta Bogdanović, managed to wrest it from the Ottomans. The Ottoman-Habsburg Wars would continue well into the 18th century, specifically until August 4, 1791, when the signing of the Treaty of Sistova ended 265 years of conflict.